We go.
All right, Eric. Today's guest is going to be one who helps our clients, our people who listen, the small businesses, and I think he's going to help in a number of different ways. Jason Cutter is the author of the book Selling with Authentic Persuasion. That title alone captures one's imagination as we think of persuaders who may or may not be authentic. What I love about Jason's story, though, is that when he was a young kid, his mom dragged him to car dealerships every couple of years. And he writes on LinkedIn his memory of sitting in dealerships and just despising the fact that he was sitting there on Sunday afternoon for 4 hours every couple of years while his mom negotiated. So Jason clearly did not want to get a job in sales. So he went the extreme opposite way and became, as we all know and love, a marine biologist and was tagging sharks. So what an interesting path. So he went from tagging sharks to becoming no, he wasn't a selling shark, but he got involved in sales, became a sales leader and author of a book and runs his own consulting company. And we are really excited to have Jason Cutter with us today. So Jason, welcome to the show, sir.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Eric. And it's interesting as you're telling that story about, and recapping what happened, with those dealerships. I would like to say that when that happened, I made a decision at a young age to change the way sales is done. And I wanted to do it in a different way. Like some people, they have a really bad experience as a kid and they're like, I'm going to change the way this is done. I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to just, fight for justice for people. And no, I didn't. I was like, oh, sales sucks. Like I'm going to go deal with sharks.
It's evil. So I love the title of the book where you talk about being authentic persuader. So when I think of a persuader, I think of a crowbar and using that because when I did a little mechanical work in my past, I needed to enforce something and we would call something heavy that you needed to enforce a persuader.
Okay.
So tell me about what an authentic persuader is.
Well, and I think that's interesting because, if we look at the definition, manipulation, which is at one end of the spectrum, is really a negative connotation in every definition that you're looking at for the end item, right? So in sales, manipulation is getting them to do what you want, usually for your intentions without their care. There's also manipulation in the definition of like manipulating wood or manipulating clay, which it has no voice. Like you're just doing whatever you want with it to make it your way. And I think that's a good visual. And then persuading in persuasion is about, could be positive or negative outcome for the other person, which is why I look at positive persuasion. But when you do authentic persuasion, then it's me coming from a place in sales or in conversations where it's me and my authentic goal is to help you. And I want to take you through a process to persuade you at something that will hopefully benefit you. And if it benefits me at the same time, that's great, right? But my goal is really to help persuade you into taking action.
That's great. So when I think of that, and I'm not sure if we had this conversation before, but were you one that would show a lot of details and give people a lot of options when you first got into sales? So that tells me something along the lines that you wanted people to feel comfortable that you were once in their shoes, right? You knew what it looked like to be in their shoes. So in your mind, you felt like you wanted options, right? And so you felt like maybe everyone else wants a whole bunch of options so they can look at a spreadsheet. Is that kind of what was happening back then?
Yeah, I broke several rules. One of the rules that I broke, which I help people overcome now, is the golden rule is wrong when it comes to selling. I think, and I forget who said it, but it's actually, they use the term platinum rule instead. Golden rule is important, right? Respect, empathy, care, concern, like treating others like you want to be treated as a human, always important. Golden rule is good. Selling to people the way that you like to buy will completely and severely limit your overall selling effectiveness as a profession and a career. Because essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell to the other person how you like to buy, which If we buy into a quadrant behavior disc type of model, that means there's 4 general major ones, which means you're really only speaking to a quarter of the population, and you'll never close 100% of any group. So you're only going to close a portion of that 25%,
Oh, that's brilliant.
and you're toast.
Yeah.
And if we add to that, if you're analytical like me as my default mode with the spreadsheets and the data, the kind of person who will never buy on the spot, wants to make sure it's the right decision. Their biggest fear is making the wrong decision or looking bad or making a mistake or being embarrassed. They want data, they want spreadsheets, they want numbers. And so if you do that, what you're going to do is put them into analysis paralysis. They're going to put their head in the sand. You'll never hear from them again. So it's actually the worst thing to do for people like me, because you're just going to put them into a tailspin. And so, yeah, like that's one of those things, right? I came into sales like most people, no training, no real coaching, no leadership, just winging it and figuring it out. Lots of mistakes I made 18 years ago that I still remember to this day.
What was the one that stands out most?
Right.
It's that one. I was in the mortgage business, and literally what I would do is I would treat others like I wanted options. I want people to feel safe. I wanted people to feel like they were making the right choice. So I literally put together a spreadsheet with 10 different mortgage options, like a 30-year fix and a 15-year, and this first and this second, and what about an adjustable, and what about this? And I give it to them, and then I would never hear from people again because I freak them out. Like, they're like, oh my God, I can't choose, right? It's why the Cheesecake Factory is so stressful. That menu is 23 pages long. It's terrible to try to make a decision. People, they like the option of choice, they like the illusion of choice, but they want a professional to help them make the right choice. And so
true.
That's
so you're a high C on a disc?
I forget which one I am. I know I'm a mess because there's my analytical side that I came by default, but I know over time, like most people do, like I've evolved and I can move around through all of them. So I'm kind of more in the middle.
Sounds like decision making when it comes time to make a decision, wanting those options and everything else. That sounds like a high C. And the other thing I would add to what you were saying, which was brilliant, by the way, majority of the time when we're selling to a high I or a high D type of individual who want facts, who want to make a decision really quickly, and they don't want details. So if somebody like that comes along with a ton of options,
crush them.
Oh man, analysis paralysis, they're not paying attention, they're gone. Absolutely.
They're gone. Especially if you got that client, that prospective buyer that just wants to know what's good for them, what's going to be fun, what are they missing out, like that FOMO buyer, right? They don't want stats and figures. They just want to know what everyone else is doing and how they do it as well. And you will destroy all of those other quadrants with facts and figures if you're not careful. So
Jason,
it's fascinating.
Guys like us who have written a book, who are in teaching, training, I haven't asked you this, so I'm just assuming. Guy like me, let me just say that. A guy like me, when I go through life now, I'm always seeing things as a lesson of some sort that I could teach somewhere, like related to something. I don't know if you do that as well. Were there any lessons from your shark tagging and shark wrestling and fighting days that apply to your sales training or to a sales career that you can share?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm always the best one at drawing all those lessons like some people are. I mean, I think it's about knowing which end is the business end and which part to be careful with. And that, if you handle things appropriately and properly, you can get, what you want done, even with a shark, right? Like we used to grab 4-foot, 5-foot blue sharks out of the water by hand, like literally reaching over the boat and grabbing them as they swim by and then tagging them because you couldn't use a net. As long as you just respect the business end, then you can, guide the process. And I think the similar things with sales, right? As long as you understand the dangerous part, which is the prospect's fear. Their fear wants to keep them in their comfort zone, like it's 10,000 years ago when there's a saber-toothed tiger that's going to kill them. Like if you can you focus on that and know the business end that could get in the way of your success, then the rest of it, you just move through the process and overcome that.
So what was it? Do you remember the first time somebody was like, hey, young Jason Cutter, who's, first time doing this, grab that shark out of the water that's 5 feet long? Like, what was that like? Do you remember what you were feeling before you reached in there?
I had done some smaller shark stuff, like 2-foot and 3-foot shark stuff, which for most people, that still freaks them out.
Yeah, it's a
And so
shark.
was fairly comfortable with that. And that was in the water. Like we were walking around dragging a net and the sharks are hitting your leg and you're stepping on them and stingrays and stuff like that. So you get past that part and then you see this shark going by and if it's something you want to do and you just understand and you appreciate and respect it without that fear, you're just like, okay, what do we do? Oh, we just grab. Okay, let's just grab it. Like, okay, I'll grab this end, you grab that end, and that's it.
That's insane. That is insane. That's like right up there with jumping out of an airplane for me is probably one of my fears. Grabbing a
And that's
shark
the
out of the
interesting
water.
thing, right? Like everyone has various fears. I don't know if I'd ever want to jump out of an airplane. Like that freaks me out. But I've, been in a 21-foot boat tagging 18-foot great white sharks, and that seems normal to me. It seems fine.
So would you call that manipulation or authentic persuasion? With that
that is just keeping your hands inside the boat at all times. That's what that is.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's brave stuff. So when you got out and decided to do what most people think is more dangerous than tagging sharks, sales, and somebody's like, okay, now you're gonna have to do something really hard and cold call. Were you like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, I've tagged sharks.
I didn't. I think in the naivete of my youth at the time, like I didn't think about it that way. My entry into sales also, I don't assign to like traditional sales because I got into it 2002 mortgage business. Housing boom was going nuts. People wanted to buy houses. You're literally, and the subtitle of the book is Transform from Order Taker to Quota Breaker. Like you're pretty much an order taker in those days. Like you don't have to convince anybody that they want to buy a house. Like it was just nuts. And so what happens is you're basically just helping people. So I didn't think of it as sales, and the company was doing outbound like direct mail. And so we were just dealing with inbound calls. So it wasn't even cold, because I didn't have to start cold calling and I wasn't selling or twisting arms in any way. And I didn't even realize it was sales until years later when I did something different. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm selling now. I didn't even put the two and two. I thought I was just advising and helping people fill out paperwork. I didn't put the two together at the time like I do now.
That's funny.
So what was your first like sales job where you said, okay, I guess I'm selling now?
So years after being in the mortgage business, I then shifted to helping people who were in foreclosure, avoiding losing their home to the foreclosure auction by buying their house or helping them sell it or helping find a buyer in some way or save their house, whatever it was. And as simple as you think it would be, like somebody who has a foreclosure auction coming up in a few weeks, you think they would be motivated. Again, everyone's afraid. They want to keep their house. They don't want to do anything. They put their head in the sand. And that actually took a lot of persuasion to get somebody to take action, even though it seems easy, right? That's when I really started to work on the craft and really realize like what it took to get somebody to take action, even if it seemed obvious.
Man, that is pretty cool.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Harry.
Yeah. So just on that, because obviously you had to develop some traits there and to be empathetic, and I don't want to give it away, but what really stood out for you to be able to be authentic in that, and where you saw that people needed to make a change, how could you persuade them? I mean, what went through your mind?
I mean, and this is what has stuck with me for a long time, and I coach people on even now and train them on, but I knew what the worst case outcome was. I knew what failure looked like for me and them. It's very clear. 10 a.m. Friday morning, house goes to auction, sheriff's going to come by the house and kick you out, like, and put your stuff outside. Like, I know literally what's going to happen versus, okay, if you don't buy my marketing SaaS platform, I know bad stuff will happen, but who knows? Like that was very clear. Failure was very clear. Yeah. And so then shifting to that, realizing like that's what it was and wanting to help them because there was plenty of people, unfortunately, in trouble even at that point, asking questions, figuring out what was important, figuring out how to get them to take action. It was the empathy. It was lots of questions. And then it was, persuading and pushing them forward for their benefit instead of letting them sit and be stuck.
Yeah. So if you were in this position of persuasion, was it, and I think this is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people, because a lot of small businesses you mentioned the software, right? It's not the same. So they don't make the correlation between this is life or death with their product, right? And so they may not be, and I'm not sure you experience this, but we definitely do, is that they give up too early when there's really an opportunity to keep being persuasive. So how do you tie that in with something that is dramatic and drastic as someone losing their house and living, you know, their stuff ending up on the front lawn versus selling a product? How do you correlate those two?
You know, for me, mentally, it's the same thing. So if I was
Okay.
selling that marketing SaaS platform, and I've helped clients who have SaaS platforms that help with various things, right? So it's not all life or death sales, if you will. But I just know and I project out what the worst outcome could be, right? So if it's a marketing platform and that marketing manager who could use this platform doesn't, and they stay on their current path and they fail, the business could go out, out of business because of marketing failure. That person could lose their job. People could be out of work. That person who lost their job could then face financial issues, relationship issues. Like literally, it always ends up to somebody being under a bridge, homeless. If you go worst case. And so that's where my duty and responsibility comes from, and what I coach people, which is if you know you can help them, then you owe it to them. Like that's your responsibility to help persuade them and move them forward. The key, though, and this is what you're saying, where people stop too early, is that most people don't dig deep enough in the conversations with empathy and in the discovery process to actually find out why it matters, like how it could actually improve or help somebody either achieve a goal or get out of pain. They're not diving deep enough to know that, and then the conversation comes from there, which is, you told me you need this, like you said this was important to you. Here's the solution. Here's why we need to do it. And that applies to when people are in trouble financially, to when somebody might want to sign up for a new CRM or buy a dishwasher.
Right. That's great. What do you think on that, Eric?
I mean, I think that's really cool to be able to take them down that path of worst case scenario. I think a lot of people don't do that. They don't ask those questions. And I love how you said it always ends up with somebody under a bridge in the worst case scenario, meaning what that means to me is you're digging so deep, it's not at a corporate level anymore, right? Well, what happens with your company if it's not, because people aren't going to buy that, right? I mean, they're going to buy emotionally. People buy based on emotion. So I absolutely love that. I think salespeople that are listening right now, a lot of them might not feel comfortable with asking those types of personal questions, right? Because you do have to ask those questions. And I think your client would have to say, well, I could probably lose my job. And there is a piece of a strong relationship that needs to be built for them to trust the salesperson to even be able to have that conversation. So let's talk about that. How did they get to that point?
Well, and I think it's a couple things. One is you've got to do things in a certain order. So you got to start with rapport. People, are going to buy from somebody that they like. They know, like, and trust, as Bob Berg says. So you got to get the like part, right? There's got to be some rapport. And then when you're doing your questions, when you're doing your discovery, that should come from a place of empathy. And what I found works really, really well is setting the upfront expectation when you're going into your questions. Hey, Eric, so this next part is I want to ask some questions and I kind of want to dive into your situation because I really want to see if this is a good fit. Like if you have your current situation is something that I can help with. If it's not, I'll let you know. If it is, I'll let you know. But I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. I really just want to get to know to make sure, see if it's something I can even help. And so you're setting the framework of here's what's coming next and here's why. I'm going to ask you questions, not just to figure out how I can sell you and trick you, but it's a good fit or it's not a good fit. And we're going to go into it. And when you do that, because a lot of salespeople are afraid to ask questions because they've had an experience where they've asked questions, they've gone deep, they've gone deeper than the person wanted, they got shut down, right? They got their hand slapped and somebody said, I don't want to ask your questions, just tell me what the price is. Like, tell me what you do. And then the rep learns and goes, oh my gosh, questions are bad. Questions lead to embarrassment and danger and confrontation, so I'm not going to do that. And so then their question, yeah, exactly, right? Everyone goes back into their comfort zone and their fear. And then your questions are garbage. They're light and on the surface. They have no purpose. You're just checking a box. My boss said I have to ask these questions, and then I can do my demo for the next 30 minutes or give them my monologue, right? It's like, no, if you had a 20-minute conversation and 15 minutes of it is asking questions and probing and listening and diving deep, that's valuable. Like nobody needs the demo. They just want to know that you care and that you're going to help them. And then back to your point too, it's like, okay, homeless under a bridge. If you're talking to a marketing manager, maybe you don't bring that up. Like, you know, are you going to lose your job? But like, hey, what metrics are you held to? What is it that you know that you're held to? What is it that you're struggling with? And then what I always talk to people about, especially in that framework where they're an employee, is what are you thinking about, worried about, or trying to always make sure is successful, that at any moment, you know, your boss or the CEO could call you and ask you about, or walk into your office and ask you about, because there's always something. I've been an employee enough times to know there's always something. I'm like, okay, if my boss walks in right now, he's either going to be happy or he's not going to be happy, and I better have the right answer at any moment. It's always true. And so that's the best place to start in those conversations.
What are some ways that you've seen to expedite that likability or rapport building or relationship building?
I think fundamentally, you know, people want people who care about them and listen to them and ask questions. Now, not talking about the discovery questions, talking about the rapport phase. And so if you want people to be interested in you and think that you're interesting, is you need to be interested in them. So asking questions, listening, just being interested in what people do, where they're from, their background, you know, things that you might have in common. Something in common is always helpful. But even if you don't necessarily have a lot in common with people, just being interested and in that rapport phase, asking the questions. Because here's the thing, that's the sad truth in the world, at least that I've been experiencing, most people don't ask. You meet somebody new, they kind of ask questions, but they just want to talk about themselves. Everyone wants to talk about themselves. So if you flip that around and you actually let them talk and you just talk about them and you ask them questions about their personal life or their business career or what they've done, like us talking about shark stuff at first, it's like, okay, these dudes care because we're talking about sharks. Now we can talk about other stuff. And when you do that with other people and it's genuine and it's authentic, people will feel that and it will blow them away because no one else in their life gives a crap about them, right? And of course people do, but most people are just focused on themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Yeah, they don't. They might care about them, but they don't want to hear about anything that's really going on in their life.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they might ask and then they're literally waiting for you to stop talking so that they can talk about themselves and their day. You know, business people are trained in networking events. Ask other people what they do for a living, because then they'll reflectively ask you back what you do for a living, and then you can jump in on your monologue. Instead of doing that, like ask questions and actually care. Like, what do you do? That doesn't matter. I want to know more about you. Like, I don't.
See, look,
I
Harry wants to really tell us about him. Now.
I do. I want to talk about me. Can we talk about me? My favorite topic. This is about me.
Can you hurry up? Because I have something to say about me too.
Let me get through me first. Then you talk about you. Let's not worry about Jason anymore, right? We had enough of him.
Yeah.
I'll go
Jason,
away.
thanks for coming.
Yeah. See you guys.
Oh man, that was fun. I just had this experience though. It just cracked me up with what you were saying. I couldn't even wait to tell you. So that's why I interrupted. I'm such a great salesperson, right? But I'm authentic, right?
Luckily, you already have rapport. I already like you, so you can just jump in whenever you want. It's fine.
And we're not selling you anything.
All right. So someone was asking me recently. I was looking. I mean, it's weird, but someone actually asked about me, about a product that they were selling. They said, "So Harry, tell me a little about yourself." So I did, right? And then I said, "All right, this is going to be weird." And I'm thinking this because they don't know what to do with this, right?
What did you tell them?
Well, I told them about my background, and it was, it wasn't like a 30-second tell them about me. It was probably 2 minutes, deep. Right? I went a little bit deeper than I do most of the time, but the person seemed very authentic. And then I was thinking, as I was saying, I said, how is this person going to respond to this? And he went, "Well, that's interesting." And then boom, let me tell you about me, my product some more, right? And I just think I threw him off because I thought he was sincere, so I sincerely answered, right?
Yeah, and for me, the solution for that, and kind of back to your point, your question, Eric, which is how do you get somebody to feel that way and feel like you're authentic and you care and you want to build that, is the follow-up question, right? It's like, tell me about you. Okay, now I'm digging deeper and deeper in that personal story, which shows that I'm listening and I care and I'm not just, okay, yeah, that's interesting, and now I'm moving on.
Yeah, because it's taking time, right? And we all have a time clock in our mind saying if we give a person 2 minutes, that's okay. But if they ask for 3, then I have to get back to me selling. And there really is no time limit, right? When you're building rapport. Now that person could easily have asked or said something that's really interesting, right? Something like that. And then maybe just ended it a little bit differently instead of going right into the product. I think the rapport was fine at the end of it all, but I mean, it could have been a little bit better by just saying, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, right? That would have gone a long way with me.
Was that a networking event, Harry?
Yeah, whatever. But it happens, right? Because I think people throw out the question, tell me a little bit about you, and don't really expect a real answer,
boxes.
right?
They're checking boxes. And I think back to your time comment, I think this is important because there's a couple of battles that happen. One is people don't want to do it. They were just checking the boxes. I got to build rapport. I got to do that for a couple minutes. My whole goal is the monologue, right? So let me do a couple minutes of rapport. Let me ask some questions. I got to check the boxes on my process in my head or on my piece of paper. I got to tell my boss I asked the questions. And then I got to go in the demo because demos sell. Demos close deals, right? All you got to do is just get to the demo or the monologue or the brochure features and benefits. Once they see that, they're going to want it. Right. But that's order takers, right? Because they're doing that. The challenge is that what I always focus on and help people realize is time is precious. I mean, I come from a background of telephone only sales. So their phone battery could die. Somebody could walk in, kids could start screaming. They could lose reception, like anything could happen over the phone. And so you always have to be prepared for that and think, if the call ended right now, is there enough reason for them to be excited next time we talk because they know there's value and they know that I can help them, right? Because that will make your follow-up more powerful instead of this annoying follow-up, which is just pointless because you're just trying to take orders. And so even if you spend it all on rapport and you don't have enough time, they like you so much and they feel like you care. I promise that is a way better seed to plant that your second call, they'll be like, okay, great. I appreciate you because in their mind, I appreciate you seem like you care. I'm ready to listen. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's really good. I think a lot of times salespeople don't put themselves in the other person's shoes that they're communicating with. And that's a really missed kind of step there because I found myself sometime rambling on a sales call and this little voice just kicks in. I think it's through years of rejection and failing in sales. And the little voice kicks in. It's like, if you were that person sitting across from you right now, what would you be thinking about you? Would you do business with you?
Yeah.
Oh man. And it's like a kick in the nuts, but it works.
I've actually done that with myself on calls, like back in the day, where I would just stop myself. Hey, you know what? I realized I'm just rambling. I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about this. I'm sorry. Hey, let me ask you a question. And then just go back into some questions. Just totally like, you know what? I don't know what happened there. I just entered into some sales twilight zone, BS. And
that's authentic right there. That's really good. So Jason, that book behind you, Selling with Authentic Persuasion, sounds like if you had to describe that book, describe it for us. Like, is it step-by-step guide? Is it a story?
It's a step-by-step guide. The second book will be more of a story mode, but it's a step-by-step guide, if you will, as a general sales practice. So not for one particular vertical or one particular sales type or style or in person or over the phone. But it's really that guide, it broken down into 3 sections. So one is the authenticity piece. What most people are looking for is the tactics. How do I close deals? How do I ask for the close? What do I say for my objections? None of that matters if you don't have a solid foundation, because it's not going to sustain. It's not going to work. It's not going to be as effective, right? If you just focus on that. So the first part is the authenticity, which is your fears, your goals, your strengths, what you're bringing to the table. Second part is persuasion. So having a process, I call it the sales success fundamentals, that rapport, empathy, trust, hope, urgency, that every sales process has to have in that order, in its completeness. And then talking about, persuading like a professional, like a doctor, like we were talking about even before we recorded, where, you follow a process. You don't have to twist arms and convince people. Like, they should be asking you to buy because you did such a good job, not order taking, but because you did. And then the third section of the book is the intangibles, these little things that when you're selling and you're up against a professional, which is your prospect who's scared to death, there's these little things that will get in the way of your selling effectiveness if you're not careful. And those are the icing on the cake for you to get to an even higher level.
What are some of those things?
One of the biggest things that order takers do, in my experience, and order taker is not a negative thing. It's not putting anybody down. It's just a state of affairs in their sales career, right? They're presenting and they're hoping. Their main strategy is hope. But one thing that happens is somebody, they're talking, somebody asks an objection or brings up an objection, asks a question, and the salesperson answers. And then what they do is they answer, they give this usually a long-winded, painful answer. They give this long answer and then they pause, right? So Eric, you ask about fee, I tell you about the fee, blah, 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 and then I pause. And then I just wait because I'm polite, right? And I don't know what to do next. And so I'm sitting there. Now, nature hates silence. Nature hates a vacuum. Prospects hate silence. And so they're going to fill in that gap with another question because, again, they're scared. They're afraid. They're afraid of change. If they weren't afraid of change, they would have already handed you the money or bought it online. So by definition, they're afraid. And so you pause. They ask another question. You answer. By reflex, you pause, you leave a gap, they ask another question. I call it the death of 1,000 punches because most salespeople can't handle it. The prospect's taking control and they've lost control. And it's just because of this little pause, instead of transitioning back to your question, transitioning back to what you were doing. For a lot of salespeople, that's a huge game changer just in that one aspect.
So how would you handle that? So I asked that question. You ask a question as a customer. I just answered. Now I'm silent. Yeah. What should I do as a salesperson?
There's a couple of things. It just depends on where it happens and what is happening at the moment. Mm-hmm. Usually what happens is objections and questions come up when things are getting real or getting more serious than the prospect is thinking about, right? Like I used to deal with a lot of debt relief financial services and be like, okay, the next part is we've got to get this complete. What's your social security number? That's real. Like a lot of people are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't know we were getting married here. Like this is too soon. If you haven't done it right. And so they freak out and they say, well, let's say, is there an agreement? Is there a contract? Yes, there is an agreement. It's a 12-month agreement. What is your social security number? Just return to the question, right? You answer it, you're polite, you address it, and then you go back. I'm in control. I still need to know this piece of data, or I need you to do this thing. If they ask it a second time, then, and you notice my answer was really short, right? It wasn't a long monologue. If they ask it a second time, that means this is serious. Be like, well, why is there a contract? I don't like doing contracts. And then I would say, yes, there's a contract, but let me ask you, why is that important to you? Like, why do you not like contracts? What is it about contracts? I call that empathetic reversing, which is then, okay, you brought this up again. I want to know why. I want to know what's at the deeper level instead of just spitting out more crap at you and trying to convince you. I want to know because then I want to address it. And most of the time, I don't care if you like a contract or not. I just have to be better than your past experiences, and we'll see if I win.
There you go. How come you didn't ask that the first time? Because I was wondering that, because the first time you kind of blew over that. Like, is there a contract? Yes, there's a 12-month contract. What's your social security number? I'd be like, this dude just wants to get a sale.
And the key is doing it in a certain tone even the first time, which is, addressing it and then getting back to it. A lot of times, this is what you don't know in the beginning. Is it just a question? Is it a full-blown objection, like a hard stop, like this is going to be an issue? Or is this just a curiosity and something they have to check the box? Because a lot of times, in my experience of sales, everyone has somebody they're going to tell about their purchase. Now, if they're an employee, they've got a boss, they've got coworkers, they got a manager, they got a team, whatever. If it's a direct-to-consumer, they've got a spouse, they've got parents, they've got adult children that might hear about this after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. Not that are required for the decision, but everyone who buys something, I bought a new car. Somebody's going to say, well, what did you pay for it? And if they feel like they weren't sure, they're going to say a price, and then someone's going to judge them and say you paid too much, right? And then they're going to feel stupid about their purchase, and they're going to feel bad. So a lot of times people ask questions just to check those boxes and say, okay, did I ask about what would my dad ask me if I bought this thing? And am I going to be a good son or a bad son, right? Or a good spouse or a bad spouse? And so I don't go straight into the empathetic reversing right away because I don't know which one it is in those categories. And I don't want to bring up problems if it's just a surface question.
That's key.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very interesting because I think my tendency would be to ask, is that a concern? Hearing that, is this a contract? I'd say, whatever, yes. And then I could look at their face, is that a concern? Or why do you ask?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, that's interesting. I mean, I like the thought process is that it may be just checking a box. And then if you're selling, you know, if you're successful doing that and it doesn't really come back up, right? You could always, it's going to resurface if it's really an issue, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Either then or later. And if it is, then we'll address it with that question, which is let's dig a little deeper. I just want to know. And then what I would say is, okay, yes, there's a contract, but the thing is, Eric, we both talked about it. We know that you need this based on what you told me. Here's your situation. Here's your goals, because I did my discovery part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, what is it about the contract? Like, let's dive into it then. I'm just not going to assume everything is a fight and an objection, because I also don't want to make a problem out of something that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this typically happen in a, you know, the proverbial one call close type scenario, or are you talking about this can happen over time?
Anywhere.
Right.
Anywhere where it comes up. And like I said, it's usually when things are getting real, which is, okay, the next part is I need to send you the invoice. Oh, hold on a second. Like, what is it? What fees are going to be in here, right?
Sure.
Like, it's usually when things are getting serious that stuff starts coming up, whether it's one call close or it's, you know, couple month long cycle, there's going to be something.
Yeah. I like it.
That's awesome. Got it.
Very observant, Mr.
Jason, let me ask you something.
Persuader.
What one question, because I know you do quite a bit of podcasts and interviews and things like that. What one question do you hope people ask you?
You know, I think the biggest thing is it possible for someone to be successful in sales without selling, like on, you know, the manipulative closing side? And I think it is. I mean, I think it's possible. Obviously, that's why I wrote the book. But I think there's a very successful place in the middle, which is where somebody who's coming from empathy, they want to help people. They think sales could be of service, and then they embrace that as a professional, and then they bring that with them. I think that's definitely doable. Also, I mean, sometimes where people shouldn't be in sales, it's not a good fit for them. There's nothing wrong with that. Life is about figuring out what you also don't like to do or aren't good at. But you know, it's also effort. It takes a long time at anything to be a skilled professional.
Got it. You know, I think this is, by the way, for the listeners, this is our take 3.5. The first time we were through an interview with Jason, an alarm went off, a fire alarm went off, and I had to kind of dip. And when I hung up, the whole interview ended, because I guess I was the host of the Zoom call.
I guess.
Yeah, but in the very first, okay, Harry, I messed up. I hung up. I canceled the whole thing.
No, you were running for your life. It's okay.
Then
it's important.
Then
you made it.
I misscheduled Jason, and I was ready to go, but I never, I guess, sent him the invite once again, I guess. So anyway, in that first interview, you really talked to us about your mom and some of your trips to the car dealerships with her.
Yeah.
Without that, you would not have the outlook on sales that you have today. And I think for listeners who may not know you, could you just tell us kind of like your journey, what you used to think sales was and how you got to this point?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up in an era where it was, you know, you were excited to answer the phone, right? I grew up, I'm a little bit older. I mean, I think in between you guys, somewhere in there. But, you know, you didn't have an answering machine. So you answered the phone. Every time it rang, you were excited. And then cold calls happened. And then there was like solicitors and telemarketers.
Was it a cordless phone, or was it one of those phones that?
No, corded phone at first. And then, you know, eventually not rotary, not quite that.
Not rotary,
so just turned 45.
That would be me. That would be me.
That would be
rotary.
By the way, everyone we interview is between me and Harry in age. So
I love it. And so, you know, and then one of the things that I actually uncovered recently and talking to my mom about all this and my parents is that my mom's first job out of high school was working at a furniture store in the back office doing, I think, accounts receivable or operation stuff. And she used to hear the salespeople come off the floor and come into the back and talk about what they were doing to customers as far as charging and getting them to buy and overcharging them and the commissions and the money. And so that added to her, even before the car stories, of like, sales is terrible. Like, these people are out to get you. Like, she saw behind the curtain and it was scary. And she, you know, just like literally there are times when growing up, my dad would answer the phone, telemarketer would start talking him into something, and she would just be on it, be like, no, we're not going to buy. And so I would like to say that I had some kind of revelation as a kid, and I want to change the way sales is. I just stayed away from them. I was like, this seems gross. Like, go into a store, even in college, I would go into a store and like jewelry store, for example, or furniture store. And like, they wouldn't pay attention to me. I'd actually do it on purpose where I would dress like a college, like in a beach town, flip flops, go into a store, see who took me serious. Most people would just ignore me. I'd go to store to store to store because they're just like, judging me and profiling me based on how I look if I have any money. And then I would find a store where somebody actually cared and actually helped me. And then they would get all the money in my pocket because I was there to buy.
Awesome.
And so I really learned, like, you don't judge, you just help people. And, I just could see what people were doing incorrect, and they still do it. I mean, this is 2020, right? People are still doing the same stuff incorrectly.
Totally. Yeah. So that's what it was. And then how did you get to, okay, sales isn't that?
It really came from getting into the sales side where I was helping people who were in foreclosure, and yes, making money from it, earning revenue from helping someone in their situation, whether it was commission from selling their house or buying the house and, whatever it was, but literally helping them and seeing that when it's done right, it's helping someone with a goal. Like I even, when I went into that focus with helping people in foreclosure, most of the people that I was kind of in my network, their goal was to get that house for the lowest price possible, no matter what it meant to that homeowner, and then literally turn around and flip it for the biggest reward, right? Like, they didn't care what the outcome was for that person. I took a different approach, ended up getting my real estate license, ended up bringing in some other partners where if the best thing for them was to keep the house, I could do it. The best thing was for them to sell it for the most amount of money on the market, I could help them. So then I became this, like, all solutions. Their goal was all that mattered. And if I did that enough of those, it would always work out. And so that was the big shift, where it wasn't like one size fits all. It was, what do you need? How can I help you?
Oh man, that's great that you thought of that. For the sales leaders who have sales teams that they're running, what should they consider if a salesperson isn't performing, up to their standards?
I mean, I think part of it is you got to know what the standards are and was it clearly set. I think that's one of the challenges, is that there's a lot of expectations that people have in their head. And this is true for relationships and life in general, but they have an expectation and people aren't living up to it. And then they're disappointed, but they never talked about it and they didn't set it up front. They didn't say, your job is to make 200 calls a day. They just hire somebody, give them some half-ass training and sit them in the seat. And then they're not making 200 calls a day and they're not winning. And then they're upset and they don't know why. So part of it is setting the expectation, holding people accountable. I think fundamentally the biggest challenge that leaders are, or where they're missing it the most with that, is they just don't know why somebody wants to be successful. One of the first things I've done with people for years, new salespeople or even people I'm coaching, first thing we do is we make a vision board. What do you want? Why are you getting up every day? Why do you want to make that 51st phone call without me yelling at you or bribing you, right? The carrot or the stick. Why do you want to make that so you can be successful for your goals? And then how can I support you on that? Most sales leaders just assume everybody is like them and they just want money, but that's not the case. Everybody's different.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times new salespeople don't want to open up to their leaders with the vision board and things like that. So that's really kudos to you for being able to do that.
But I think that also comes down to the sales process, because I think if we look at it and extrapolate the sales process and the challenges we were talking about with people who didn't want to ask questions or don't dive deep, those salespeople usually get promoted to be sales leaders, and they don't get training and they don't get coaching themselves.
Yeah.
And then they sell their team the same way they sold on the phone, which probably maybe wasn't with empathy. It wasn't with building trust. It wasn't with rapport. It's with, I know the right answer. You're either on board or you're not. And it's a numbers game, right? If I just hire 1,000 salespeople, I'll get a good team, right? If I make 1,000 phone calls this month, I'll close some deals. And so they just torch through people the same way they sold.
Yeah, there's way more salespeople who can't sell on the market looking for sales jobs than really good salespeople being unemployed. Just saying, good salespeople are really
and
high
a lot
demand.
more sales leaders in management roles who were never given the right support to be actual managers, leaders, coaches, and they're just bringing with them their sales style. And again, it's either going to fit or it's not, because they assume everyone's like them.
Yeah, I've been there. Mine didn't fit. Let me ask you this. Do you have any tips for the cold callers over the phone? Like, is there a certain script, or is there a way that they could build that rapport over the phone or with a LinkedIn message that sounds more authentic than the 110 that I get every freaking week that says, hey, I really want to connect with you. Your profile looks amazing. I've listened to your podcast. It's great. I'm like, damn, this is awesome. Yeah, let's connect. Hey, Eric, thanks for connecting. My company does blah, 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 blah.
Well, and I think there's two different things. So that LinkedIn debate is probably a conversation for a whole nother episode. But I think the standard thing with that is that you've got to build the relationship and the rapport before moving into those kind of things. And it's got to be authentic. And that usually involves a bunch of, engagement on posts, chats back and forth, and playing the long game if you're going to go on that route. The challenge is that I can also sniff those out. I can sniff those out when I connect with somebody, they like a couple of my posts, they endorse me for some skills they don't know that I have, and then all of a sudden they're trying to be my friend. I see that coming as well. So I don't know if I have the right answer other than building relationships. And if you have a solution, maybe it's a good fit. But the instant 2-page monologues,
stop it.
It's terrible. I actually have a new response for those, but we don't need to talk about that right now. But for the cold calls, I'll send it to you. You'll like it. Right. So the cold calls, that's something different. So when you're cold calling, you have a certain intent. I think the biggest key, and this is what I train people on, is just to be authentic, be yourself, call it what it is, be super transparent, and then set a small upfront contract, right? Hey, Eric, this is Jason from Cutter Consulting Group. This is a cold call. I know you weren't expecting this, but if I could get 60 seconds of your time, I'd like to see that, find out more about your sales team. And based on what I do in helping sales teams, if it's a good fit, maybe it's worth talking further. If it's not, I'll let you know. Would that work for you? Right? Yeah. Give me 60 seconds. And I'm calling it. This is a cold call. I'm not like, hey, is this a sales call? No, this is a sales call. I just wanted to see, no. Call it what it is. And here's the thing that's interesting is that if I call you and you're open to it and you're open-minded and you're looking for solutions and you want to fix something or get better, you will be open for those 60 seconds. You'll say, sure, that sounds good. I'll give you 60 seconds. Right. If you're so close-minded, you wouldn't give me 60 seconds. I promise that's going to be a hard sale if I could ever make it, but I guarantee I probably can. And I'm not saying you should just take the easy ones and be an order taker, but you want to have at least a crack in the door where someone's at least open to new ideas. If they're so close-minded, that's all you need to know.
So that, first one, they're skeptical, they're closed-minded, they didn't do anything. What's your next step with that person? How long do you wait, or what do you do next?
I mean, if they say like, no, I'm not interested, and they couldn't even give me 60 seconds to discover them, no, I'm probably never going to call them again. Like, unless I'm doing some serious account-based where, like, I know they have my problem and I know they're just scared. Depending on what, it depends on the vertical, right? I work in some higher volume where it's like lots of calls, some lower volume account-based. If it's account-based, I might try different strategies because there's a chance they're just having a bad day. I caught them at the wrong time. Like, maybe I would do another follow-up. That just depends. But I'm also not going to push it too hard. If they said no, they don't even want to talk for 60 seconds, I might try them one more time. And I'd probably be honest. Hey, I called you last week. I know you said you weren't interested. I know sometimes life happens. I didn't want to assume it was a no. Maybe you're having a bad day. I know it happens to me.
Maybe you're just a jerk.
I don't know. Maybe you're only a jerk on Thursdays, so that's why I'm calling you on Tuesday.
I'm calling you on a Friday because, maybe Thursdays aren't a good day for you. And I'll tell you, like, my authentic style, man, I joke and I call it like it is. I'll be like, yeah, I don't know if it was just a bad, maybe a bad time or bad day. I know that it was Mercury retrograde last week, and I know that's just, challenging for people. So who knows? But I know that I have this sense that I really could help you and your sales team based on what I know about your company and what I found out. And so, like, I just wanted to try one more time and see if I could get 60 seconds.
Got it. Right? And if they say no, you're like, all right, I tried Thursday, Friday. I'll call you next Tuesday.
Sunday at 5 p.m. will be the next time. Then
there you go. Awesome, Jason. Well, I think we learned quite a bit from you today. What legacy are you leaving behind?
The biggest thing that I'm focused on right now is helping fill the world with authentic persuaders and sales professionals and really shifting the way that sales is done from this dirty word that prospects are afraid of and people are fear interacting with to something that people see as a service where they're excited to talk to a salesperson because they know they can get help and get to a better place.
And how can our listeners reach out to you if they need some of your services?
Simplest thing is if they go to jasoncutter.com. I have that as a hub for the different projects. So I have a coaching program, which is all done via a voice app that I'm doing with salespeople and leaders. I have my book. I have a LinkedIn link on there. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so if anyone wants to find me and send me a chat, that's not a 2-page instant message. I'm happy to interact on there as well.
Awesome. Harry, you
Been
got
a real pleasure, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why you're successful.
Thanks.
Keep it up, man.
Well, and round 4, I think that was the key, right? We got all the other stuff out.
Yeah, no, I think we actually made it to the end.
And did we hit record?
Yes, okay, it says stop recording. Whew. I'm looking because there's no recording anything.
I think we're still recording.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Jason, it was a pleasure. And we
man.
wish you the best of luck with your selling with authentic persuasion and your company. And we learned a ton here today. Thank you for being with us.